Throughout my rise in independent media, I've always respected Limbaugh as one of the fathers of independent talk. In many aspects and in many ways, he paved the way that made it okay for the rest of us to go out there and start stating our opinions out on a stage for others to hear. In a world where most of the media was controlled by just a handful of companies, and this isn't even talking about the news, this is talking about entertainment, news, and many other aspects of the media that are buying each other up as well. In spite of this, I often find myself at contention with a lot of the things that Limbaugh says while he's on the air. However, the opening for this past Tuesday's Rush Limbaugh show knocked it right out of the park, and he was exactly on point with what he was saying and what he meant when he was saying it. Now, I searched far and wide to try and get a video clip to include on this video of the beginning of that episode, but to no avail, I couldn't find one for you. But I will be putting the transcript of the episode linked in the description below, so make sure you go check that out, because I can only paraphrase so much, and you should be hearing what he said from the source. But in the beginning of the episode, Limbaugh starts out talking about the fact that the Democrats have moved into demanding impeachment for various reasons. They've given up on the Russian collusion narrative. They're kind of still hanging on the fence about what they're going to do with the taxes and the finances, but they are moving into impeachment. And this is a classic argument that's been going on from the very beginning of this presidency and even before. I did a Google search the night of the election as soon as it looked like Trump was going to win. I wasn't even looking for anything related to the election. But the first thing that I put in Google was how to, and the first suggestion that came up out of Google was how to impeach a president. So this is something that has been going on from the moment that the left in America realized that they were going to have Donald Trump as the president. For the most part, the mega faithful in the country have been out there telling the media, telling the Democrats in Congress, and telling the people who support the Democrats in Congress the same thing.
Do it.
Now, there are people out there like me that look at the impeachment of Trump, look at the indictment that the impeachment would bring forward, and would like to see the president actually get a day in court and be able to defend himself rather than just being tried in the court of social media. There are those of us out there that want that. But for the most part, the majority of the people out there that are faithful to the president look at the impeachment and the trial that will come out of it, and they have the same assumption that people like me did have going forward before we actually sat down and thought about it. There's been an assumption ever since people started talking about impeaching the president that if he were to be impeached, it would go exactly the same way as the Bill Clinton impeachment went back in 1998. The assumption is that Trump would get acquitted in the Senate because he didn't actually do anything wrong, and the Senate is actually pretty faithful to him at this point. And then his poll numbers would skyrocket, leading him into a handy re-election in 2020. But Rush pointed out the flawed logic in this argument almost immediately as he was still going through his opening monologue, and after he pointed it out, I really thought about what he said, and I realized that he is absolutely right in what he is saying. The portrayal of the case is going to be the major difference between what former President Clinton went through in 1998 and what President Donald Trump would potentially face going into an impeachment attempt here in 2019. Now, because of what the House wants to push forward for impeachment against this current sitting president, these two cases would on the surface be almost similar, but as I said before, the difference is absolutely in the portrayal. Now, the impeachment of Clinton happened in December of 1998, which means I would have been 14 at the time. And up until a couple of years ago, I didn't even realize that this had anything to do with perjury or lying under oath or pushing other people to lie under oath. Because of the way that the media spun everything and the portrayal that they put of the entire thing, I thought this entire trial came about because Bill Clinton cheated on his wife, something I didn't realize was a crime at all, and I was always very confused as to why the president was impeached and later acquitted in the Senate. I had no idea why somebody would be under a criminal trial for something that's usually a civil case in anything, but the news media portrayed it as such. The media wanted to portray the conservatives who were seeking impeachment as stuffed shirt Puritans who were absolutely appalled by the fact that Clinton was having sex outside of a committed relationship and disappointing America in the eyes of God, and they were also angry by the fact that he was getting some and they weren't. Limbaugh goes through this point by point, and he's absolutely right on point when he goes through it. But the Trump impeachment, if it does go through, is going to be portrayed as the crime that they are trying to commit. They're already doing this even before an impeachment goes through the House. They are trying to make sure that everybody in America believes that this is an obstruction of justice charge and that Trump actually did obstruct justice, no matter what happens in the Senate after he is tried and most likely acquitted. We don't have to have the impeachment go through to know what's going to go on with it either. We can look at what's going on in our country right now, especially in the news media. Not only are they already talking about the fact that this is definitely going to be an obstruction of justice charge and an impeachment that does come from obstruction of justice, but the news media, the people that support the Democrats, and the Democrats themselves continue to talk about the Russian narrative as if it was actually real and as if Mueller actually found something in there to confirm the Russian narrative. In addition, they're also going back after the taxes and the finance, and their ultimate goal out of all of this is not to get the president removed from office. They know that they can't do that. The ultimate goal is to make the president look as bad as he can going into the 2020 campaign so that the people of America will remove him from office for the Democrats. It's almost obvious at this point what the congressional Democrats and the DNC in general did going into the Trump administration. It's the same playbook that they've had since the 70s after they convinced Richard Nixon to resign from office before they actually had to put a trial together and try him and hope that all of the evidence stuck in the Watergate scandal. And indeed, if you look back through history, they have done this to every single president that has had an R next to his name ever since they convinced Nixon to walk out of office. It's the endless investigations, it's the hammering from the media, and it's just a stew of things that they're all trying to put together to try and convince every Republican president to resign from office before they actually have to try and get him to resign or remove him from office manually. And Limbaugh pointed all of this out as he was going through his monologue, but I'm looking at things, I'm looking at the country, I'm looking at some of the more volatile points in this country, and I'm realizing the fact that I think the Democrats' plan, and especially the media's plan, but I repeat myself, is going even further than that. The MAGA faithful in this country are a very loyal group, and if the Democrats were to go forward with this plan to impeach, even if they go into it knowing full well that the president is going to be acquitted, this is going to cause outrage from this group. In addition to the news media being able to paint the president by his own actions as a bad person, as somebody who obstructed justice, and as somebody who's unfit for office, this would give the news media a large amount of news bites, especially from Twitter feeds from some of these MAGA faithful, that they can then use and present and try to paint the broader conservative movement in this country with one single broad stroke. It would be an endless sea of screenshots and screen grabs of various people on Twitter expressing their outrage to the Democrats, and that would be the same label that all of the rest of us in this country would be painted with, further driving the president's numbers down and further driving his approval rating through the floor. We all knew that the end of the Mueller probe was not going to mark the end of the attempt from the American left to remove a president from office that they never wanted to see in there in the first place. We saw this happen through all 8 years of W, and we most likely saw it through Nixon and HW as well, but the fact that I was in single digits in age means that I can't really personally attest to that. I know some people who are older than me that will let me know and will tell me that this is actually what happened, and I do believe them. But after seeing this happen to Trump and seeing it happen to W. Bush, I genuinely believe that this has been a nonstop thing ever since Nixon and probably before. Now, everybody who's going into this knows the fact, as I said before, that the president is going to survive the trial that goes through the Senate. The Republicans have a majority in the Senate, and many of them cannot go home with Trump in office with MAGA people in their home districts and hope to get reelected if they were to push this trial forward and actually remove the president from office. The hopes there are not to get the president removed from office at this point. The hope is to make the American people remove the president from office in 2020 by driving his approval numbers down. It is nice to think that if the Democrats actually do this and it's a failed attempt, that the same thing will happen to Trump as happened to Clinton. But in reality, the news media in this country, especially on the mainstream side, is not going to allow that. What do you think about the fervor to suddenly move to impeachment of the president? And do you think Nancy Pelosi and the House Democrats will actually move forward with this? I always welcome a thoughtful, positive discussion in the comment section below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at EdsBlog Twitter with a 1 in place of the I. Thanks as always for listening to this show and supporting this channel. And remember, never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. Take care.
You're always